In today's video, we're going to look at the indirect function. Indirect function returns a reference specified by a string. So as we know at this stage, it's a simple case of referencing another cell by simply putting equals and the other cell reference into a cell, such as if I demonstrate here, if I do equals A10, this should return 3, and it does. Well, indirect does something very similar. It also returns the cell reference, but it returns it as a string. So in this instance here, in this cell, I've the function equals indirect, and put it into quotation marks, E10, close quotation marks, close bracket. So it's going to reference this cell here, and it returns 3. So if we do it the other way of just referencing equals E10, they give the same answer. But if I now insert a column, we can now see that the indirect function has changed, it's gone blank, but this function has updated to from equals E10 to equals F10. The relative cell referencing is updated. The indirect cell referencing, because it's referencing string, hasn't updated. And sometimes that is useful if we don't want the relative cell referencing to kick in. There are several ways that you can use the indirect function. So first of all, we can use it directly to reference a cell in the same sheet or in another sheet. So for example, this function here references sheet 2 and cell B10 in sheet 2. So if I go to sheet 2 and go to cell B10, and it has 8 in it, and this formula is returning the value 8. Here is a different way of using the indirect function. So we have indirect referencing cell B4. So in B4 we have this full sheet and range reference. So it's sheet 2 and cells B2 colon D7. So it's B2 to cells D7 inclusive. So it's these cells here, and what it's doing is finally it's summing those. So it's essentially the sum of these cells here, and if I look down to the bottom, the sum is 1033. Another way of referencing indirect is indirect just pointed to a cell B5, and it's referencing a range E3 to G5, so there's no sheet reference there, so it must be on the same sheet. So there we have E3 to G5, and it's getting the average of these numbers here, and the average is 4. You don't have to point to a different cell. As I said, you can just use the full reference, cell reference or sheet reference as a string, just remembering to put it in double quotes. So these are the same as these, just the entire cell reference as a string is embedded directly into the formula. Another use for indirect is to take data from two separate tables. So here we have sales figures for 4 regions for week 1, and on another sheet we have sales figures for the same regions called week 2. Now we have a summary sheet, and the summary sheet at the moment has 4 indirect formulas, and the indirect formula is taking in the reference for cell A1, which holds this string here called week 1, then the ampersand, and then quotation marks which have exclamation mark B2, exclamation mark B3, exclamation mark B4, and exclamation mark B5. So what this is doing is using the sheet reference, the sheet name as week 1, and then concatenating, that's what the ampersand does, exclamation mark B2. So what in fact it's saying is indirect sheet week 1 and cell B2. So it's actually looking for a sheet called week 1 and cell B2. So it's returning 1529 or returning 1529. Now if I change the sheet reference from week 1 to week 2, watch the sales figures change, and there they go, they're updated, because now the formula is saying, well, cell A1 now is week 2 exclamation mark B2, so in fact it's actually looking to the sheet week 2 and the sales figure of 1679. Now what we could do is, to actually make life a little bit easier for ourselves, we could put validation in here. So let's just try that just as a reference. So it's data, validation, and list of items. So we'll just type in week 1, week 2. Nothing else required, and save. Now I just click on week 1, numbers change, click on week 2, the numbers change. And that's easier to use, simplest thing ever, validation. And similarly with the VLOOKUP, we want to find the best prices for bananas. So we have figures for supplier A and figures for supplier B. So the VLOOKUP is looking to cell A2, which is the name of the produce, so the bananas here in this case. And then for the range we have indirect A7, so it's looking to this cell down here. So the range is F3 colon G5, so it's looking to F3 down to G5. So this is the range, and then it's pulling the data from column 2, so it's this column here. And finally the 0 just means don't return anything unless you have an exact match. So what we want to do is, well, we want to look at each range in turn. So it's currently looking to this range, but we want to update it so it looks to this range here. So it looks to F11 down to G13. So if we just change F11 and G13, the best price should change, and it does, 240. Why does it change? Well, the VLOOKUP is still looking to the value A2, but the indirect A7 is now looking to the range F11 G13. So it's looking to this range here. So it's found bananas and it's looking to column 2, so it's picking up the 240. So, and that's where the price is. Now we could again add validation to both this value and this value to make our spreadsheet a little bit easier. So data and validation, and then the list of items. So the first one was F11 to G13, and then F3 to G5. Save. So click the drop down arrow, F3 to G5, and the figure changes 240 to 250. We can also add validation here, so we can change the produce from bananas, oranges, and apples. So clicking here, and then data validation, list from a range this time, so just select the range as bananas, oranges, and apples. Save. So if we change the oranges, banana produce to oranges, 310, so it's 310. Well, I change the range to there and 300, so we're getting cheaper oranges from supplier A. Change from apples, 175, F11 G13, and 178. Thank you for watching.